My hands are spotted now, the skin thin as parchment, shaking just enough to spill the tea if I don't hold the cup with both of them. But in my dreams they are steady. In my dreams they are stained not with the liver spots of age, but with the thick black grease of the Lod's textile mills. Or maybe it is gun oil. After a lifetime, the memory of one slick, viscous fluid blades into the other. They feel the same. They smell the same. They are both the blood of machines. I was sitting in a trench dug into the freezing mud of the Seelow Heights, the gateway to Berlin. It must have been April, though the calendar had long since ceased to hold meaning for us. The days were measured only in distance gained or friends lost. I held the bolt of my Mosin Nagant, a heavy, brutal piece of Russian steel. My thumb worked a rag soaked in solvent into the locking lugs, finding the grit, removing it, polishing the metal until it gleamed dull and gray in the overcast light. Disassemble, clean, oil, reassemble. It was the rhythm that saved me. Back home, before the world tore itself apart, my life was governed by the rhythm of the looms. The clatter of the shuttles, the hum of the drive belts, the thumping heartbeat of the steam engines. If a machine broke, it spoke to me. A screech meant friction. A rattle meant a loose bolt. I could diagnose it, put my hands into the guts of the iron beast, and make it right. Metal was honest. If you treated it with respect, it worked. If you neglected it, it failed. There was no malice in a machine, only logic. But here the logic was twisted. The silence of the front was not the peaceful silence of a sleeping house. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed against your eardrums. The air was thick with the smell of wet wool. Unwashed bodies and the metallic tang of the earth itself, churned up and bleeding. And underneath it all, faint but constant, was the scent of the city burning miles away, a smell like roasting meat and sulfur. I hated the quiet. In the factory, silence meant production had stopped. It meant failure. Here, silence meant the enemy was listening. It meant they were waiting. I watched a boy from my squad, Jurek, I think his name was, though faces blur together now like watercolor left in the rain, leaning against the trench wall. He was young, barely 20, with the careless immortality of youth still clinging to him despite the months of marching. He looked bored. He scraped the mud from his boot on a protruding root, then idly kicked a loose, fist-sized rock tumbling into the center of the dugout. My body reacted before my mind could process the image. I flinched a violent, full-body spasm that slammed my back against the dirt wall. My breath caught in a throat raw from cheap tobacco. My eyes snapped to the ground where the rock had landed, scanning frantically for the disturbance of fresh earth, the glint of a tripwire, the telltale depression of a pressure plate. Nothing happened. The rock just settled in the mud. Jurek looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion, a half-smile forming on his lips. He didn't understand. He saw a rock. He saw dirt. He didn't see the world as I did. He didn't know that the ground was no longer solid earth, but a casing for death. He didn't know that a single misplaced step, a shifted stone, a piece of wire thin as a hair could turn a man into pink mist. I forced my heart to slow down, the thumping against my ribs painful and erratic. I returned to my rifle bolt, my fingers resuming their work. But the tremor was there. The fear wasn't of dying. We had all made our peace with that. The fear was the mistake, the oversight, the mechanical failure of my own senses that would kill not just me, but the boys standing next to me. I wiped the oil from my thumb. The factory floor had been safe, predictable. This war was a machine designed by a madman, and I was terrified I didn't know how to fix it. A shadow fell over me. The low murmur of the men died out instantly. Lieutenant Mazur stood above us. He was a hard man, his face looking like it had been carved from granite and left out in the rain too long. He didn't offer greetings. He didn't ask how we were. He simply crouched down and unfolded a map onto a crate of ammunition. The paper was soft with dampness, tearing at the creases. He traced a line with a finger that was missing the tip of the nail. The Vistula was behind us. The odor was behind us. His finger stopped on a blue snake winding through the heart of the charcoal-smudged ruin that was Berlin. The spree. The first armored needs a clear path, Mauser said. His voice was gravel, grinding and low. The bridges are rigged. Jerry is going to blow them the second a T-34 touches the asphalt. And he looked up. He didn't look at Jurek. He didn't look at the sergeant. He looked at me. You're clearing it, Kowalski. I looked at the map. The bridge was a choke point, a funnel, a perfect place to die. I looked at Mazur's eyes and saw no pity there, only the cold calculation of war. He needed a mechanic. He needed someone who could speak the language of fuses and fulminate. I didn't salute. I didn't say a word. I just gave a slow, single nod, feeling the weight of the rifle bolt in my hand, heavy and cold. The factory worker in me looked at the job and saw the impossible complexity. The soldier in me looked at the map and saw a grave. We moved out at dawn, crossing the threshold from the relative safety of the trenches into the suburbs of the capital. The transition was absolute. One moment we were in the fields, where the war was two-dimensional, front and back, them and us. The next, we were in the city, and the war became three-dimensional. Death could come from a cellar grate, a fourth-story window, a sewer cover, or a pile of rubbish. The fog was lifting, revealing the skeleton of Berlin. It was a landscape of rust and ruin. Buildings were sheared off, exposing living rooms and bedrooms like dollhouses cut in half. Furniture hung precariously from shattered floorboards. I shifted my pack, feeling the weight of the wire cutters and the crimping tool against my spine. I forced my mind to shift gears. I stopped looking at the city as a place where people lived and started seeing it as a broken machine. That wall wasn't a wall. It was a load-bearing structure compromised by stress. That pile of debris wasn't random. It was a constructed obstacle, likely mined. We advanced in a staggered column, hugging the walls. The silence returned, but it was different here. It was brittle. The sound of boots crunching on broken glass echoed like gunshots. Ahead of me, a replacement soldier, a boy from Warsaw who had joined us only a week ago, paused near a shattered storefront. He spotted a helmet lying on a wooden crate. A German helmet, pristine, with the decal still visible. A trophy. I saw his hand reach out. I didn't think. I didn't shout. The mechanical intuition that had allowed me to time the looms within a fraction of a second took over. I launched myself forward, my shoulder driving into his waist, tackling him hard into the wet ash of the gutter. He shouted angry, scrambling to push me off, his face twisted in shock. "Are you mad, old man?" he hissed, reaching for his rifle. I didn't answer. I pointed. He looked back at the crate. In the dull morning light, a copper wire, fine as spider silk, glinted. It ran from the underside of the helmet to a bundle of stick grenades wedged into the masonry of the wall. If he had lifted it, the boy went pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked at me, his eyes wide, the anger replaced by a sudden, sickening realization of his own mortality. I stood up, brushing the ash from my knees. I didn't wait for a thank you. There are no thank yous for doing your job. Don't touch anything, I whispered, my voice raspy. Nothing is free here. We pushed deeper. The resistance was sporadic but fierce. We found an 88 anti-tank gun, abandoned in a small square. The barrel drooped like a wilted flower. The breech was open. It looked dead. The squad moved to bypass it, giving it a wide berth, but I stopped. Something was wrong. The way the debris was piled around the wheels. It was too orderly, too deliberate. Nature creates chaos. Men create patterns. I held up a hand, halting the column. I approached the gun, moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a man walking on ice. I knelt in the mud, the cold seeping through my trousers. I traced the lines of the carriage. There, hidden beneath a layer of brick dust, was a pressure plate, and running from it, buried under the mud, a wire connected to a demolition charge, packed into the storm drain beneath the gun. It was a trap designed to take out the infantry, using the gun for cover. I pulled my cutters. The metal felt good in my hand, familiar. I isolated the trigger mechanism. I found the tension. Snip, the wire parted. The circuit was broken. The machine was safe. For a second, just a second, I felt a surge of pride, the satisfaction of the craftsman. Then the world exploded. There was no sound at first, just a sudden, violent overpressure that knocked the wind out of me. Then the crack of the sniper rifle arrived, echoing off the brickwork like a whip crack. A bullet sparked off the gun shield inches from my face. "Sniper, top floor," someone screamed. Chaos erupted. The orderly column dissolved as men dove for cover behind rubble and ruined cars. Machine gun fire raked the street, chewing up the asphalt. I scrambled on my belly, dragging my kit through the muck, heart hammering, breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The sensory overload was blinding, the dust, the noise, the screaming orders. We crawled forward inch by painful inch, until we hit the embankment of the river. We were pinned down, the air above us filled with swarming light. And there it was, the bridge. It loomed over us, a massive skeleton of black iron against the smoke-choked sky. It was the only way across. The water of the Spree below was dark, churning and cold. The lieutenant crawled up beside me. His face was streaked with blood from a cut on his forehead. He grabbed my shoulder, his grip like a vice. He pointed toward the far side of the bridge, under the great stone arches. "Look," he screamed over the roar of a Maxim gun. I squinted through the smoke. Gray shapes were scuttling in the shadows beneath the bridge. Germans. They weren't fighting. They were working, pulling wires, checking connections. "They're blowing it," Mazur yelled. "Shaking me. Kowalski. It's rigged. Get down there." I looked at the river. I looked at the dark, cavernous space beneath the bridge. It was a mouth, a gaping industrial maw filled with girders, shadows, and death. It was the inmost cave. It was the place where the wires would be tangled, where the triggers would be hidden, where the machine was waiting to kill us all. I looked at Mazur. I looked at the bridge. My fear didn't leave me. It just became another part of the mechanism. I checked my cutters. I took a breath that tasted of cordite and ruin, and I prepared to step into the dark. I slid down the embankment, the mud sucking at my boots like a living thing trying to pull me into the earth. The air temperature dropped sharply. The frantic staccato of the machine gun fire above faded, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic slosh of the Spree River churning against the stone pilings. It was a different world down here, a cathedral of iron and shadow. The smell was distinct, wet rust, rotting river weed, and the sharp, metallic tang of ancient grease. It was the smell of the factory floor after the shift ended, cold and industrial. I moved deeper into the gloom. The bridge overhead was a massive skeleton, rivets the size of apples, girders thick as oak trees. I could feel the weight of it, the immense tension held in check by physics and steel. I found the main charge strapped to the central support beam. It was a masterpiece. I had to admire it, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. The Germans didn't just build bombs. They built puzzles. A heavy block of high-grade explosives was wired to a precision timer, the mechanism encased in a bakelite housing. My hands stopped shaking. They knew what to do. I wasn't a soldier shivering in the mud anymore. I was back in Lodz, standing before the number 4 loom. The machine is jammed. The production line is halted. The foreman is watching. Diagnose, isolate, repair. I trace the leads. Red to the igniter, black to the ground, yellow to the timer. It was a standard circuit, almost insulting in its simplicity. I worked the cutters, the metal cool against my palm. I isolated the power source. Snip, I severed the ground. Snip, the faint ticking from the bakelite box ceased. I exhaled a long, shuddering breath that fogged in the cold air. I wiped the sweat that stung my eyes. It was done. The path was clear, but the silence was wrong. It was too absolute. In the factory, when a machine stops, there is a specific feeling, a settling of gears. This felt different. This felt like a breath being held. My intuition, honed by years of listening to the hum of engines and the rhythm of pistons, screamed at me. A machine that yields this easily is lying. I kept my hand on the explosive block. I didn't move. I shone my light along the backside of the steel girder, probing the shadows where the light didn't want to go. There, a faint line of copper, painted over with a slurry of rust and dirt to blend perfectly into the pitted iron. It was invisible to the eye, but the beam of the light caught a tiny imperfection in the texture. I followed it. It bypassed the timer entirely. It snaked down the support, disappearing into a small, welded metal box wedged deep in the crevice of the stone foundation. My stomach turned to ice. A secondary trigger. A pressure release. The German engineer who built this knew me. He knew I would be methodical. He knew I would cut the timer. And he knew that the moment I severed that circuit, I would complete the secondary loop. I hadn't disarmed the bomb. I had woken it up. Above me, the iron skeleton groaned. A fine mist of dust drifted down into the beam of my light. The bridge began to vibrate. The rumble started low in my chest, a deep resonance that shook my teeth. The Polish T-34s. They were advancing. They thought the bridge was safe. If the light tank hit the center span, the weight would shift the girder by a fraction of a millimeter. That was all the pressure switch needed. The circuit would close. The bridge, the tanks, the men, and the river would be consumed in a flash of fire and steel. I had seconds, maybe 5, maybe 3. I traced the wires from the hidden box. 2 leads, both coated in identical, featureless gray rubber. There was no schematic. There was no manual. There was no foreman to ask. The roar overhead became deafening. The rivets shrieked under the shifting load. I could hear the treads grinding against the asphalt above, the sound of victory turning into a death march. I couldn't think. Logic was useless here. I had to feel the machine. I reached out, my fingers brushing the gray wires. The machine was alive. It was vibrating with the approaching tanks. I touched the left wire. It was taut, singing with the tension of the bridge. Rigid. I touched the right wire. It had a fraction of slack, a tiny bow in the rubber. The machine wanted to kill me. It was built to punish the hand that tried to fix it. The taut wire was likely the anchor. The slack wire was the trigger, waiting to be pulled tight by the shifting weight. Or was it? The tank was directly overhead now. The world was shaking. I was a factory worker trying to stop a runaway flywheel with my bare hands. I placed the jaws of the cutters around the taut wire. If I was wrong, I would never know. I squeezed the handle. I closed my eyes. The explosion never came. Instead, the world was filled with the triumphant, bone-rattling clatter of steel treads rolling overhead. The bridge held. The dust shook loose from the rivets, coating me in a shroud of gray powder, but the fire remained trapped in the explosive blocks, silent and cold. The current died in the wire, severed by a guess, by instinct, by the grace of God. I sat in the mud for a long time. The water of the spree lapped at my boots, indifferent to the fact that I had just bargained with death. The adrenaline drained out of me, leaving me hollowed out, scraped clean inside. I had guessed right, or perhaps the machine had simply shown me mercy. When I finally climbed up the bank, the sun was blinding. The smoke was clearing, drifting away in ragged streamers. The tanks were across, their turrets turning toward the heart of Berlin. My unit was cheering. Men slapped my back. They offered vodka. They called me a hero, but I couldn't feel their hands. Their voices sounded distant, like they were speaking through a thick glass wall. I was still down in the dark, staring at the gray wire. I was still waiting for the flash. Berlin fell. The war ended. The uniforms were folded away. I went home to Lodz. I am an old man now. My workshop is quiet. The factories in the city are running again, churning out cloth and steel, the smokestacks painting the sky gray. But I do not work there. I cannot handle the noise. I cannot handle the massive, thundering machines that shake the floor. I fix clocks now, watches, tiny, intricate mechanisms that fit in the palm of a hand. I work in silence. People say I am meticulous. They see how I organize my tools, laying them out in perfect parallel lines. They see how I polish every gear until it shines like gold. They say Stanislaw is a master of his craft. They do not see me check the front door lock 5 times before I can sleep. They do not see me staring at a light switch for 10 minutes, terrified that flipping it will bring the ceiling down. They do not see me wake up screaming because the radiator hissed. I survived the bridge, but the hypervigilance never turned off. The sapper is still awake inside me, crouching in the dark, waiting for the click. The war took the factory worker and left a watchman who can never leave his post. I pick up a small brass gear from my workbench. I hold it up to the light. It is perfect, precision cut. A machine is built from a plan. All the parts work together for one purpose. If a gear breaks, you replace it. You consult the manual. You make it run again. But war is a machine designed to break itself, to break everything. And you cannot replace the parts that are lost. You cannot order a new innocence from the warehouse. You cannot repair the soul that was left under the bridge. My greatest fear was making a mistake, the silent error. But the lesson I learned is that sometimes, in order to build something new, you must first be willing to take apart the thing that is trying to kill you. You must be willing to cut the wire. The loom is broken. The factory is silent. I am just a mechanic standing in the wreckage, holding a wrench that fits nothing. This memory is a shard of glass I carry. Help me pull it out. Subscribe to keep this history alive.